Hello, it is Ryan, and I was on a flight the other day playing one of my favorite social spin slot games on ChumbaCasino.com. I looked over at the person sitting next to me, and you know what they were doing? They were also playing Chumba Casino. Everybody's loving having fun with it. Chumba Casino is home to hundreds of casino-style games that you can play for free anytime, anywhere. So sign up now at ChumbaCasino.com to claim your free welcome bonus. That's ChumbaCasino.com and live the Chumba life.
Sponsored by Chumba Casino.
No purchase necessary. VGW Group. Void where prohibited by law. 21 plus. Terms and conditions apply.
If you work in university maintenance, Grainger considers you an MVP because your playbook ensures your arena is always ready for tip-off. And Grainger is your trusted partner, offering the products you need all in one place, from HVAC and plumbing supplies to lighting and more, and all delivered with plenty of time left on the clock, so your team always gets the win. Call 1-800-GRAINGER, visit Grainger.com, or just stop by. Grainger, for the ones who get it done.
Season 7 of Sun Coaches Podcast is proudly brought to you by Titan Sensor. Season 7. That was my number in high school, so maybe this will be lucky for us. We'll see. You know, I've learned over time that when somebody's talking about something you really don't want to talk about, you just can always throw in there, hey, I knew this guy once, and then just pretty much make up whatever you want to, and they won't listen to it. They'll get off track, and you don't have to talk about the uncomfortable thing anymore. Coach, like we do every week, tell everybody where you grew up and where you're from. Sun Coaches Podcast, where not everybody has a funny story, but everybody has a story. Hope you enjoy Season 7 of Sun Coaches Podcast. Sun Coaches is proud to partner with Titan Sensor for Season 6 and 7. Titan is made in the USA, proudly founded and based in Texas. When you connect with Titan, you are not alone. You can collaborate and share templates with other coaches across the country to build reports and foster competition. Used by programs such as State 6A Georgia State champion Grayson High School, Titan can tailor a package to fit your needs. The eye in the sky never lies. Improve your team's performance with Titan. Welcome to Sun Coaches Podcast, Season 7, and I'm excited today to be joined by the offensive coordinator at State Power Oxford, Alabama, out of Oxford, Alabama, Coach Shea Monroe. Thanks for being on with me.
Hey, thanks for having me, Coach. I really appreciate it.
I fumbled the intro there a little bit.
That's all right. No worries.
Not used to getting guys from the beautiful state on here. I have tried. I think you're the second one.
Yeah,
but did you grow up over there, or are you from elsewhere?
I actually grew up in Loganville, Georgia, Coach. I went to Grayson High School and played for Mickey Conn there.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so I got kind of a interesting career path how I ended up in beautiful Alabama.
Okay, so did you just play football in high school, or did you play other sports as well?
So I played football, and then I dabbled in wrestling. At the time, Grayson was pretty decent in wrestling. Steve West was our head wrestling coach. Great guy. He's in the Hall of Fame. Actually was a head coach at Shiloh for a long time, and Coach Dustin Calwa, who was like a 3-time state champ there, and then wrestled at NC State, was a ACC champ there a couple of years. But I dabbled in wrestling, wrestled there for a couple of years, and realized pretty quick I was never going to beat the guy who was in my weight class. And at the time, our wrestling team was really good, and stopped wrestling my junior year, and then I actually did track and through the discus. So tried to be involved, and at the time in Georgia, when I went to Grayson, there was 5 classifications, and my senior year was Grayson's 3rd year of playing in the biggest classification. So,
how things have changed.
Oh yeah, no doubt. Actually, it's funny. I heard I talked to one of my old coaches not too long ago, and he made the comment. He's still in Grayson, and he's not coaching anymore, but he still lives there. And he said, "Man, when I came to Grayson, it was pickup trucks and country music, and it's a lot different now."
Yeah.
So, but it was great. It was a great place to grow up, and made a lot of lifelong friends, and it was coached by some great guys.
So, did you get an opportunity to play at the next level after high school?
No, I didn't, and that's kind of where coming to Alabama is kind of my story changes a little bit. So, Coach, like to give you some context, most kids want to grow up and be Michael Jordan and Emmitt Smith and all those guys. At least people my age did. And, my dad was a big high school football fan. And, we would talk about, he would tell me about high school football games he had seen and all the great coaches in the state. And, those guys wanted to grow up and be Michael Jordan and stuff. I wanted to grow up and be Ed Pilcher. I wanted to grow up and be Alan Chadwick and, Buck Godfrey and all those guys, all the great coaches that, my dad talked about. I had it in my mind pretty early. I wanted to be a high school football coach. So, but the problem was I wasn't a great student. Okay. So, academics were, something I didn't take, tremendously serious. When I was in high school, I made decent grades. I wasn't like a terrible student, but, probably could have made better grades. And I think a lot of the times I, ended up doing a little bit better than I did because my teachers liked me. So I actually went to Jacksonville State University in Jacksonville, Alabama, and didn't know really anybody over here. But they accepted me into school conditionally. So, got there and was a volunteer student coach for 5 years. I actually started out, I walked to the field house my very first day on campus and there was a girl working the desk out front. And I just said, look, I want to be a football coach. Who do I need to talk to about volunteering? And she said, well, just leave your name and number there. So I left it and I was walking to class later that afternoon. And I got a call from a guy named Toby Norwood and Coach Norwood is actually a Georgia guy too. He played at Brookstone down in Columbus and then he ended up playing at Stanford, out in Palo Alto. And he was our corners coach. And he called me and he said, look, I got your name here. And they said, you want to be a coach? Well, we don't have any we don't have anything for like student coaches right now, but we got a position in the video room, video and practice, if that's something you're interested in. And I was like, yes, sir. I'll be up there. And he's like, well, can you be up here, tomorrow? Yes, sir. I'll be up there tomorrow. So I actually did, I was a video guy for a couple of years and got plugged in that way. And then ended up working myself up to like an undergraduate student coach deal for 3 years. And, got to be a part of some exciting things at Jacksonville State. It's a lot different now than it used to be. We were, FCS, Ohio Valley Conference and had a bunch of success. I was there when we beat Ole Miss, in Oxford, Mississippi, and man, what an awesome experience that was. And, just be a part of that. And, we went down to Florida State and, had them beat and, ended up losing in the last couple of minutes of the game, but, got to go to Georgia Tech and Paul Johnson's first year at Georgia Tech. They opened with us and man, you couldn't tell they hadn't ran the triple very long because that's when they had Josh Nesbitt and actually one of my little league teammates, Roddy Jones, was one of the A backs and man, they were something else. Jonathan Dwyer was a B back and man, they were, and Demarius Bebe Thomas was playing wide receiver and man, they were great. They were awesome, but man, just a lot of great experiences at Jacksonville State.
Yeah, I got my 6th year from Jacksonville State, so I'm an alumni as well.
Heck yeah, man. Heck yeah.
That's pretty cool. I wish I would have actually gone there because it seems like such a cool part of the state and a nice area, and like right now you're not far from it.
No, I actually live about 10 minutes outside of Jacksonville.
So when you got out of school, what was your first, what did you do after Jacksonville State?
Yeah, so when I left, going into my spring break of my senior year, I was doing my student teaching, and we were on spring break, and I actually had some job interviews lined up back in Georgia, and it's kind of funny, and this all comes full circle here in just a little bit, Coach, but I had just started dating my now wife at the time, and she's a local girl. She's from Jacksonville, this area, and my wife is actually 7 years older than me. So she had a career already and established, herself, and her whole family was here. And so, but, I had it in my mind, I wanted to go back to Georgia and we'd only been dating for about 6 weeks before this came up. So I actually, I had 3 interviews. I interviewed at Wayne County, down there in beautiful Jessup, Georgia. And, then I interviewed at South Paulding with Coach Tim Glanton. man, what an awesome guy. I actually had a connection with him through our offensive coordinator, or through our running backs coach at the time, Jimmy Ogle. And then I interviewed at Dublin High School with Coach Roger Holmes. And Coach, when I was a senior in high school, we had gotten knocked out in the second round by Norcross in double overtime. Well, one of my best friends on the team was our quarterback, and his dad was a Nazarene pastor. They had moved from Olathe, Kansas to Grayson, so his dad could pastor a church. And they had a big Nazarene convention in Dublin, Georgia. And it was the Friday they were playing GAC in the third round our senior year. Okay, so me and him and one of our other buddies, we went down there with them, and we went to the football game at the beautiful Shamrock Bowl. And it was the year Dublin and Charlton tied for the state championship.
Oh yeah,
so,
I was at that game.
Yeah, and it was so the third round game with them and GAC was electric. The Shamrock Bowl was packed, and we sat on the GAC side and on the visitor side. And man, I just thought to myself, man, what an awesome place this would be to coach. And man, the support they had there was second to none. So I go on all these interviews, and Coach Holmes offered me a job, and coaching tackles and tight ends for him, and I accepted it. And he sold me on, hey man, it's a great program, great tradition, and he was right. It is a great program, great tradition, and he's a legend, no doubt about it. And they were coming off an 11-2 season, lost to Calhoun in the quarterfinals. And I'm thinking, man, this is going to be awesome. We're going to go down there and win a bunch of games. Well, my one season there, we go 2-8. What he didn't tell me was they lost about 30 seniors off that team that went 11-2, and we were going to be playing a bunch of young bucks. But an awesome experience nonetheless. You realize how much you don't know about football working for a guy like Coach Holmes, and man, super thankful for him. And I only got to spend 1 year with him, but great experience and just a fantastic guy. I still talk to him to this day. We try to catch up before the season, and then we might talk once or twice during the season. But just a great guy and a heck of a ball coach.
Yeah, Coach Holmes is definitely a legend, ain't no doubt. And I don't care if you spend a year or 10 years with him or just 10 minutes, you're going to learn something from him.
Oh, ain't no doubt. And he's, and people that know Coach Holmes, if you don't, he's one of those guys, if you don't spend any time with him, you'll never learn this about him.
Tyler Reddick here from 2311 Racing. Another checkered flag for the books. Time to celebrate with Chumba. Jump in at ChumbaCasino.com. Let's Chumba.
No purchase necessary. VGW Group. Void where prohibited by law. CT&Cs. 21+. Sponsored by Chumba Casino.
He's one of the funniest human beings. I mean, he's a masterful storyteller. Now, look, he gets after it on the field, and he holds his coaches to a standard. And you better have your P's and Q's ready when you step out on that practice field. That's something I learned real quick. If not, you're going to catch one from him. And which, heck, that never bothered me. I got a lot of that at Jacksonville State. So, but man, just an awesome guy. And our staff at the time was a really talented staff. You talk about Lance Helton, who's the head coach of Jeff Davis, still one of my best friends, was on that staff. We worked together. He coached the centers and guards. I coached the tackles and tight ends. And Steve Versprilli, who's been a head coach a couple different places, was on that staff. Don Vandegrift was the defense coordinator. He's been a head coach a couple different staffs. Jeremy Hawkins was our DNs coach. He's now the D-line coach at Georgia State. Just had a great staff and really enjoyed. Rusty Waters was our running backs coach. He's the DC at Roswell. I mean, just awesome staff, awesome guys.
So where'd you go after that?
So I'd made the decision that, I was going to marry my wife and with her being a local girl and me and having spent 5 years over here, I just decided that I was going to move back to Alabama. So, and coach, it's crazy how things work out. So, I told Coach Holmes I was leaving to, get married and go back and he understood. And so about that time, Brad Wallace, who was the defense coordinator at Washington County, he'd been there for a long time with Coach Tomberlin and then with Joel Ingram. He was the defense coordinator there. He's actually an Alabama guy. and he played at Jacksonville State. Well, he had gotten the head coach at Lincoln High School in over here near the Talladega Super Speedway, and that's his alma mater. And Coach Holmes said, "Hey, is Lincoln near Jacksonville?" And I said, "Yes, sir. It's about 30 minutes." And he said, "Well, I know the guy who just got the job. I'll give him a call for you." So Coach Holmes graciously called Coach Wallace and told him, "Hey, look, I got a guy who's moving back to Alabama. I think this guy would do a good job for you." And so, I ended up going with Coach Wallace there, was with him for 4 seasons. And, you talk about Coach, like I've got kind of a weird career in the sense of, I'd coached 1 year of high school football before I went to Lincoln. And Coach Wallace had hired me to be his offensive line coach. So I'm going there thinking, all right, I'm just going to coach offensive line. And so we get there, and, he had hired an offense coordinator who'd been the guy had been a head coach at another school in Alabama. Well, come July, this guy picks up and he leaves and he takes another head coaching job in July. Now, okay. So Coach Wallace was a defensive guy. So he comes to me as a second year coach and he says, "Hey, you're calling the offense." And I'm like, "What?" And he's like, "Yeah, you got to run the offense, man." And I was like, "Okay." And, thankful for Coach Wallace and, everything he did for me. But he was super patient with me that first year because, he knew there was going to be some growing pains. And, he did a really good job of helping me out. And once again, had some really good guys on that staff. And, fortunately, we made the playoffs, 3 out of the 4 years I was with them. And, had some success, won a region championship, went to the second round a couple of times, and probably had one of the biggest upsets in Alabama high school playoff history. Our last year there together, we had squeaked in the playoffs. I'm talking like we were 3-7 and squeaked in the playoffs, and we go play Demopolis, who's a storied program in the state of Alabama. They're out towards Livingston, West Alabama, Tuscaloosa, that area. And Demopolis was 7-3, and their 3 losses on the year. In Alabama, the highest classification is 7A, and we were 5A at the time at Lincoln. Well, their 3 losses that year had come to all 7A schools. And, Coach, there's a reason they were having to play 7A schools. It's because nobody really wanted to play them. And so they had to schedule, non-region with 7A programs. Well, they were 7-3, and the 3 losses they had to 7A programs, and then their 7 wins were all by 40 points or more. So we go over there and played really well, and we ended up knocking them off 27-24. And it's a night I'll never forget, because I don't think anybody besides the guys in that locker room thought that we had a chance, and we ended up pulling that one out. So it was a great night.
Yeah, it's funny how if you can get kids to peak at the right time, teams to hit their stride at the right time, the things they can accomplish. It don't always have to be the best team statistically or traditionally or whatever, but if you were better that night and that week and the preparation and everything else that goes into it, it usually pays off.
Yeah, no doubt. And, that's something that it was just a lot of fun being a part of that staff and just being a part of that ride. And every stop I've had has been a little unique in some sort of way, but, just really thankful for that point in my life, because I've made a lifelong friend in Brad Wallace, who actually, ironically, is working for Coach Holmes now at Dublin. And, just a fantastic human being, a fantastic guy.
So where did you go after Lincoln?
So, Coach, I went to Asheville High School. There was a Coach Wallace had left and went back to Georgia, and there was a coaching change at Lincoln, and I thought it was probably just best for me to try my hand somewhere else. Was not interested in being the head coach there or anything like that, and it's just one of those things. I think it was just time for me to move on, and so I went to Asheville High School in St. Clair County. So Asheville, I got there in 2018, was there 5 seasons. The first 2 as offensive coordinator, worked for a man named Barry Simmons, fantastic human being, just a salt of the earth man, the kind of man you want your kids playing for. I mean, it's one of those guys that, never said a bad word on the field or, but was a very intelligent football coach and had a really good experience there with him as an assistant coach. Well, then, 2020 hits, the pandemic comes and Coach Simmons decided that, he was going to take an opportunity elsewhere. And he took a job at another school as an assistant coach. And so he told me, he said, and I was ready to pack up and leave and go to my next gig. And he told me, he said, man, you really need to apply for this job. And I was like, what are you talking about? And he's like, look, he's like, I think you'd be a really good fit here. He said, you're really good with the kids, the people in the community like you. And he's like, I think you ought to apply for this job. So I said, all right. Well, I applied for the job and I ended up being the head coach there for 3 seasons, 2020, 2021, 2022. And coach, to kind of give you some perspective on Asheville High School, some context. So Asheville was one of those jobs back in the 80s and the 90s was a really, really good job. You're talking about some really good coaches in Alabama have come through that place. Rush Probst, everybody knows who Rush Probst is. That was his first head coaching job in the state of Alabama. The only semifinal team Asheville ever had in 1992, Rush Probst was the head coach. Was his assistants on those staff were Bill Clark, who's the head coach at UAB and Jack State, and obviously, did a lot of great things and was a high school coach and, won some state championships as a high school coach, but, obviously revived that program at UAB. And then John Gross, who was, longtime high school head coach in the state of Alabama, and then ended up being the head coach at Jacksonville State when they played for a national championship in 2015. So, I mean, you're talking about some guys that have come through there that, had done a lot in their career, but really Asheville had not had a winning season since 2005. And actually, the last guy who had it, got another Georgia connection, a guy named Scott Peavy. Scott Peavy was the head coach of Haralson County for a long time and, recently left there the last few years, come back to Alabama. And so when I took over in 2020, we're talking about, 14 seasons or 14 years of losing seasons. And, my first year we were able to go 5-5 and, had a small senior class, had 6 kids and, played a lot of guys, played a lot of sophomores and some freshmen and, felt good about where the program was headed. And 2021, we ended up going 6-4, missed the playoffs by 1 game. And, once again, continue to grow the program. And then in my last year, we just, for whatever reason, man, we couldn't put it together. 2022, we ended up going 2-8 and, I look back on it and, I probably didn't do as good a job as I should have. Managing some things, but that's part of the experience and part of the growth as a coach is, you take these lessons and you learn from them. But Coach, I'll tell you this: 5 years there, man, it's a wonderful place. I mean, you're talking about just, country kids. I mean, you're talking about good kids and hard workers, but just kind of kids that give you the shirt off their back and never had any parent problems. And, there were some challenges that came with the job, obviously, but, never had any issues with parents or the administration was great to me while I was there. And like I said, the kids are why we all do this, right? And they were just a wonderful group of kids to be around. So, spent 5 years there. And then I got 2 small children. I got a 10-year-old daughter and an 8-year-old son. So after the 2020 season, and then 7-5. And, and kind of the way it works over here, Coach, is Asheville, once again, we're 1A through 7A in Alabama. Well, it's not like it is in Georgia. The small schools in Alabama are like really small because like every little community in Alabama has their own school. And so like at Asheville at the time, we had about 300 kids, 9 through 12 in the school, but we're 4A. So you're talking about being, small single in Georgia, and I don't know what the smallest enrollment in playing football in Georgia is, but we got some 1A schools in Alabama that have about 90 kids.
What's up, Foos? Main event Jay Uso here from the WWE. When it's just me between matches, it's day one-ish. And that means it's Chumba time. With hundreds of casino-style games and new titles arriving weekly, there's always something fresh to try at Chumba Casino. The daily boosts make it even more fun. And have me about to get them all during my downtime. Ready for a fun way to chill out and enjoy a few minutes for yourself? Let's Chumba.
No purchase necessary. VGW Group. Void where prohibited by law. See T's and C's. 21 plus. Sponsored by Chumba Casino.
Kids in the school 9 through 11, which is how they do their enrollment. And those teams are playing football. So you're talking about kids with, programs with 20, 22 kids on the team. So, I mean, we were able to get participation up pretty good. I think my last year there, we had about 60 on the team. Decided after that 2022 season, because of my kids, I was the head football coach. I was the athletic director. I was the assistant softball coach. And because we do softball in the spring over here. And Coach, I'll just be honest with you, I was burnt out. I was unhealthy. I mean, I was 265 pounds. And, I mean, I've never been that big in my life. And I just decided, all right, I got to do something else, because if not, I'm going to go crazy or I'm going to die, one of the two. And, it's not really how I wanted to live my life. So I actually took an assistant job at Boaz High School, working for a man named Jeremy Sullivan, who Coach Sullivan had been the offensive line coach at Jacksonville State when I first got there, and then transitioned into high school coaching and got to work on the defensive side of the ball, coached the secondary, and got to run the weight room and just, man, awesome experience. Great kids at Boaz. Coach Sullivan, I was lucky. He'd kind of established that program. By the time I got there, he'd been there 7 years. And, just, had it running really well. I mean, I walked into a really good situation in the weight room where the kids loved lifting weights. And, I asked them when I went in there, and they paid for me to get USA weightlifting certified. And so I asked him, I said, Coach, is there anything, particular you want me to do in the weight room? And he said, look, he gave me about 2 or 3 things that he believed in. And he said, outside of those 2 or 3 things, he said, Coach, you can do whatever you want. He said, but I just want these kids really strong. And I was like, all right, well, I can do that. And, talk to a guy named Jason Wicker, who's down with Coach Strick down at Ware County, and, really kind of adopted his model of weightlifting. I think he does an incredible job. And, they've always got strong kids everywhere they've ever been. So, really enjoyed getting to work that year at Boaz, and had some success, went to the playoffs that year and upset Southside High School in the first round. They were the 1 seed and we were the 4 seed. And thankfully we were able to go over there and beat them 10-7 on that night. It was a really fun year. And after that season, Coach Adams at Oxford had an opening for an offensive coordinator, and Coach Adams and I had known each other for a while, and he called me, and his offensive coordinator taking a head coaching job, and he just said, look, would you be interested in, talking to me about this job? And I was like, absolutely. Boaz from my house is about an hour away. Oxford is about 25 minutes. I mean, it's the same county where I live. It's a city system, but it's, in the same county where I live. I've never been this close driving wise to my house. So, went there and had an interview and he ended up hiring me, and that's where I've been the last 2 seasons, and, had some success last year. We went 13-1 and got the semifinals, lost to Parker, who ended up winning the state championship. And, just an all around, great place to be. Oxford's always, have great football teams and a lot of tradition, and you're in a place where people expect a lot out of you. But the good part about that is the kids expect to win. And so it's not real hard to get them motivated to practice and to lift weights and go to meetings and stuff.
So what was your transition like going from coordinator to head coach at Asheville?
Well, it was, I was kind of lucky in the sense of, like, I already knew the kids, right? So that part of it wasn't a big deal. And Coach, like, personality wise, I didn't change who I was, I just, I try to love them kids, and I try to be about loving kids, and that's, I'm not saying you got to, talk to them like we're talking all the time, but I was a little bit more conscious of how I talk to kids now than I was when I was 24 years old, being an idiot. So from that standpoint, it wasn't bad. The organizational piece of it, I don't think anybody can really prepare you for it unless you've worked in a program where, like at Oxford, Coach Adams is extremely organized and detail oriented, and the organizational piece at first was a little challenging, but thankfully my admin gave me some time during the day to work on football and to work as an athletic director. So I was able to get pretty organized pretty fast. But Coach, honestly, like when I became the head coach, I hired an offense coordinator and hired a defense coordinator, and Coach, I didn't even wear a headset on Friday nights. It was pretty awesome. I had those guys calling sides of the ball, and obviously I knew what was going on. I had a couple of buddies ask me, they said, well, what do you want to do? How do you tell them if you want something done? I said, it's easy. They're both on the sideline. I'll walk over to them and say, hey, do this. It ain't that hard. But, Coach, I really focused all my energy on just trying to love the kids up and get them motivated to play football. And, just trying to provide the best high school experience that we could there at Asheville. And we were able to do a lot of things. And I say we because, Coach, it wasn't like I was the one doing everything now. I mean, you ain't only as good as the people around you. And I had some great guys at Asheville High School and some guys that just worked their tail off. And, we were able to completely update, facilities there. And we raised a good bit of money to modernize the weight room and update some things in the field house. We were able to redo our locker room in its entirety. And man, it was something I'm definitely proud of. And, but it makes you appreciate things. And, like at Oxford, we got an indoor, 50-yard long indoor that's the same width as a regular football field. And I mean, brand new weight room. We got coaches' offices. It's the first time I've ever had my own office as a coach. Even when I was a head coach, I didn't have my own office, and it makes you appreciate things like that. Definitely.
So growing up in Georgia, and you coached a year in Georgia as well, how much different is summer there, or is it any different? And how do you guys handle, spring ball and your scrimmages in the fall? I mean, how do you guys navigate all that?
Yeah, so the difference in the summer, I know some guys, and I've been at places in Alabama where, generally in Alabama, what most people do is they go 3 days a week in June and then add a fourth day in July. And, what we do at Oxford is we go 3 days a week all summer. And our head Coach Adams is huge on, spending time with family and getting to, him and his wife and his son do a lot of traveling in the summer. So, he gives you a 4-day weekend every week is the way he looks at it. And in Alabama, we can't do the padded OTAs, the half pad camps like y'all can in Georgia, but we can do, we can throw in as many 7-on-7s and do as many OTAs as we want past a certain part of the summer. So I think it's the first, maybe 2 weeks of June, you can't do any competition. But after that, you're pretty much, you can do as many competition dates as you want. As far as spring ball goes, Coach, so what our state adopted after COVID was what they did was, so if you choose to do a spring practice, you have to start like the first week of August when normal start date is. Okay, if you choose not to do a spring practice, okay, you can start actually practicing the last week of July, which, Coach, the only difference is you get to go in pads a week earlier than everybody else does because you still got to use that last week of July for acclimation.
Right.
So what we do, and because our baseball team is really good here at Oxford, and we have some crossover guys that are pretty important to our success, What we do is Alabama has what they call a 2-hour-a-week rule. So you can get your kids together, the whole team, for 2 hours a week during the spring and work them. So, we might spend, one day doing an hour of, just install stuff. And then the next day we might spend an hour of just on the field work. So, and that's outside of your normal athletic period, coach. So that's kind of how we do it. We are a 2-hour-a-week team with no spring ball. And, I've been on both sides of the coin. I'm not sure which one's better, to be honest with you. I think at the smaller school level, when you're sharing so many athletes, I think that, not having a spring practice is probably more beneficial. Because you got so many kids in track and baseball, and there's so much stuff in Alabama going on in the spring. You got soccer and that sort of stuff where, we're a 6A program at Oxford. So we have about 1,300 kids in the school. So, taking advantage of spring, I could see where some programs, it might be beneficial, but I'll be honest with you. I don't like spring practice. Okay. And that's just, because it's towards the end of the school year, and coach, I'm tired. Everybody's tired. I mean, it's almost like, hey, let's just get to the end of the school year. But that's just me being completely transparent. I'm not saying one's better than the other. I'm just saying I do not like spring practice.
Well, I don't either, but I get it. I understand why we do it, and I understand why people do it,
sure.
and that's fine. So how do y'all handle, do y'all have fall scrimmages, or do y'all go right into the season?
Yeah. So that's something I forgot to mention. So if you don't have spring, you can have one fall scrimmage. Okay. So you can have one scrimmage versus an opponent. We don't get the 2 scrimmages like y'all do if you choose not to do a spring. So we only get one. And we do it with Oak Mountain, which is a 7A program out of Birmingham. But I mean, coach, I've heard you say on this podcast, and I'm 100% agreed with you. We start football way too early, man. I mean, it's crazy. Like, just the heat and stuff these kids got to deal with. And I mean, it's a lot, and I mean, you're playing a freaking football game, the first week of August. It's insane, man. I wish they would back everything up. We do the same thing in Alabama. It's a lot, man. And it's 200. It seems like it's 200 freaking degrees outside too when you do it. I mean, it's just a lot.
With the recent passing of the PSR to determine our playoff rankings, and y'all will probably be right behind us on that. Going to some kind of format like that, I don't think we're going to get seasons backed up. That's not gonna happen, because we're trying to get teams in and more teams in and all this other stuff. When the only way they're going to back seasons up over here or the only way they could is if we retracted the number of people we had in the playoffs and did it like the old days where the top 2 from each region went, or the really old days when just the region champs went. But that's not going to happen, because everything's now in the hands of generation of the everybody gets a trophy generation, and they're not going to retract it. Plus, it makes too much money.
Right, and that's what
to do that.
It's the root of all evil, man. It's the root of all evil is that money, that almighty dollar.
Yeah,
so
it's going to drive it no matter what you do and how you do it. So what are some things? What are some ways you've changed in the coordinator's role since that week in mid-July years ago when the coach came to you and said, "Hey, guess what? You're also going to be the coordinator," to being the OC at Oxford?
Yeah, it's been a wild ride, and I've always just been a big believer in, you definitely got to do things your kids can do, your players can do, and I've never been a fan. Like I heard Jeff Herron say that one time about you got to be able to adapt to what your players can do, and look, I've never met Coach Herron, and I mean, but he's definitely, he don't know this, and he's probably had a million people say this, but he's just had guys like that have had a huge impact on my career, just because I listen to the things that they say, and that was such a blessing getting to work with Coach Holmes for that year. Was you just sit there and you listen to what he's got to say. You don't say anything, you just listen. And it's like Coach Holmes is, he's been running wing T since 1970, 6 or 77 when he was a sophomore in high school, since they put it in on that open week. And, and that's something he believes in, but and he's got a system, and that's great. And people say, well, how can you say that? And he definitely changes. It's just who he gives the ball to more. If you look back at that 2019 season when they won the state championship and played Brooks County at Georgia State, and if you look at it, that he gave that joker at fullback the ball a lot that year. A lot. And now he had two wing backs that were 1,000-yard guys, but he gave it to the guy playing fullback a lot more, and he rushed for 2,300 yards. He was more of a fullback-oriented run team, and that's, something I believe in. You got to do what, your roster allows you to do, number one, the talent level of your kids. And then the second thing is, you just got to be flexible, and you got to be able to adjust. So, when I first started at Lincoln, we were a two-back, Gus Malzahn, Chad Morris at Clemson type deal, a lot of power counter, inside zone, buck sweep. And that really fit our kids. And we had a really good quarterback, a really athletic kid named Zay Caldwell, and ended up playing college baseball at Miles. And that fit our personnel really well. Well, when then I get to Asheville, and, as the coordinator, the head coach has a lot of determining on, hey, look, this is what I want to run, as far as the overall context of your offense. Hey, I want to be, 10 personnel, or, hey, I want to be 11. Or, when I first got there, we were definitely a spread team, and we had a really talented quarterback who could throw it. The problem was we didn't run it very well. So we weren't great in that world. But when I became the head coach, and really this isn't a knock on Coach Simmons at all, because it was just the type of kid we had coming through there right now. We didn't have a lot of skilled kids, but we had a lot of big bodied offensive linemen. Now, when I say big bodied, Coach, I'm not talking about I'm talking anywhere from 5'10" to 6'3", and they were all, 260 or bigger, but they weren't super athletic kids. So it's all right, you can't run wing T if you don't have super athletic kids, and you dang sure can't run wing T if you don't have backs that ain't going to block. So what we did was we morphed into a single wing team for 3 years. And, we played our strengths, which our strength was playing good defense, trying to be strong in the kicking game, and control the clock, try and keep that other team off the field. And, my goal every single week as the head coach was to go in at halftime and say, boys, you got a chance in the second half. Because, Coach, this, and you've probably been on both sides of it. But when you're running spread, and whether you're playing with tempo or not, if you're just not very good, and the other team's just better than you, and you're down 42-0 at halftime, there ain't a whole lot of things you can say to your kids at halftime. You can say, hey, just keep playing, man. Just keep playing hard. That's about the only thing you can say to them. Where if you're shortening the game, and, you're trying to, keep the other team off the field, and you go in at halftime and you're 14-7, you're down 14-7, you can look at them jokers in the eye and you say, boys, we got a chance. But Coach, that was because of how our roster was made up. So when we get to Oxford, I walked into a really good situation. Had a quarterback that was committed to Louisville, a kid named Mason Mims, who was a senior last year. And we ended up having, 3 all-state wide receivers and an all-state tailback. So, my job, that job became pretty easy. It was get one of them jokers the ball and make sure the guy who's pulling the trigger knew who he was going to, which, we got to play 14 games doing it that way. And, year to year, and we're kind of in the same mindset this year, but, we're starting a sophomore quarterback who's the little brother of the kid that just left. And, he's going to be a really good player, and he's done a really good job for us this season to this point. But he's just not as far along as his older brother was. So we've had to do some things where, we're kind of living in a different world right now, and trying to be a little bit more downhill run game. And, that sort of thing. But it wasn't like a wholesale change from my first year at Oxford to my second year.
So how active are you in the process when you guys bring in new coaches? I mean, obviously on the offensive side of the ball, you probably have a lot more say, but what do you look for in your assistant coaches that you try to bring in to help you run the offense?
Well, the first thing is, like, I don't really have any hand in that at Oxford. Coach Adams does a really good job of hiring quality guys. And thankfully we don't have a lot of turnover here, and if I know a guy about my extent of it is, hey, if we have a position open, he might ask, hey, do you know anybody that, you think might be a good fit here? So I might, say, hey, I know this guy and I think you do a really good job. But, thankfully for me, I work for a really good man and a guy who's been doing it a long time. And he hires quality people. But, when I was a head coach, I didn't really give a crap how much ball you knew. My thing was, like, are you going to treat kids the right way? Are you going to love kids? Because I wanted to be a kid first program, and everything we do, every decision we make is going to be about the players. And, that's kind of the number one trait I looked for. The second thing you look for, obviously, is how do you think that individual would jive with the current staff? Do you think you'd be a good fit? Is it, you don't want too many of the same guys on the staff. You need a little, and I'm not talking about age. I'm talking about maybe just personality. Like our offensive line coach here at Oxford has been here for, 27, 28 years. And man, he is awesome. He's an awesome coach, but buddy, he's a grade A butt kicker. You know what I mean? He's an old school offensive line coach who gets after them, and the kids love him, and because he does a great job of building relationships with them. But when you got that guy on staff, you don't need, 3 other guys on the offensive side of the ball just like that. And I mean, Coach Adams can be that way, and he's heavily involved in the offense. He's the play caller. I'm not even the play caller. And, I mean, he does a fantastic job of just, of building our offense and making sure that everybody's on the same page.
That's definitely helpful when you're in a situation where you don't have to worry about those other things. And like you said, you get to a point where you burn out and you just want to coach ball.
Right.
And you don't want to, wear the AD hat and be the head coach, live far away from home. And when you got little ones, it's hard to deal with. Yeah,
absolutely. And, being a husband, being father is the greatest titles I've ever had. And, my next favorite thing is being called coach. And I wouldn't trade, this life can be crazy. It can be stressful. It can be a lot of different things. But, being wouldn't have it any other way. I truly love what I do, and I'm very, very fortunate to get to do what I'm doing, even though, sometimes, people above you maybe make it a little hard for you to do it. But that's okay. If you keep the main thing, and if you keep the kids first, then, you have more good days than bad days.
Well, Coach, I've enjoyed listening to your story and you sharing it with us and letting us, a lot of us guys over here in Georgia that are ignorant to the goings on of how things are in Alabama. You definitely opened my eyes to some things that I was unaware of with your spring practices and how you guys get to do what you do over there and continued success at Oxford this year and the coming years. And I sure do appreciate you coming on and sharing your story with us.
Coaches, and I really appreciate it, man. And just keep doing what you're doing, man. I love listening to it and love everything you do. I appreciate
Season 7, thanks, Coach. Son Coaches Podcast,
yes, sir, thank you.
Is proudly brought to you by Titan Sensor. Season 7.
Hey, it's Cole Swindell, and when I spend 200 days a year rolling down the highway, the bus can start to feel smaller than a guitar case. Everyone wonders how I stay chill while the hours crawl by. Truth is, one good luck spin on Chumba, and suddenly the trip feels a whole lot shorter. Finding your space, even when there isn't much to spare. Need some chill? Let's Chumba.
No purchase necessary. VGW Group. Void where prohibited by law. 21 plus TNCs apply. Sponsored by Chumba Casino.
When you manage procurement for multiple facilities, every order matters. But when it's for a hospital system, they matter even more. Grainger gets it and knows there's no time for managing multiple suppliers and no room for shipping delays. That's why Grainger offers millions of products in fast, dependable delivery, so you can keep your facility stocked, safe, and running smoothly. Call 1-800-GRAINGER, click Grainger.com, or just stop by. Grainger, for the ones who get it done.